the December 9th, 2015 Selectmen's Meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Roll call.
Cindy King is here.
Gordon Clark, present.
Carolyn Smart, present. Would you all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to announce that we are tape recording this meeting. 1.4, Chairman's additions and deletions. The only thing I have is there is a little bit of a difference in our schedule. Originally at 6 p.m. we were interviewing Carter, which we still are. Susan Kennedy, unfortunately, is not able to be in the running, so at 7 p.m. we'll be interviewing James Kreidler, and we don't have a third appointment, so that would be the only change. So 2.1, interviews with interim town administrator candidates, and our first one is Carter Townsend. Terenzini. Would you like to join us?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, making the trip. So what I thought we could do is each of us could ask questions, if that would be okay with you?
Sure, absolutely.
Do you want to start, Cindy?
Why don't you?
Okay.
Go with the chair.
All right. One of the issues I feel this board has is with communication. I feel better communication with the employees on policies issues and with the residents of this town. What is your communication style, and how can you help us improve getting information out to the people?
My process is to try to use a number of mediums. First, with respect to the staff, the department heads, it is my practice that the morning after a select board meeting, I have a department head staff meeting in which I review the matters of the previous night, questions that you may have raised, inquiries that you may have made. You know, Joe, can you work on this? Can I have an answer back by, give them a date? I go through the full agenda, what happened, the board decided to do this, the board had decided to do that. Are there any questions of those things? No? Okay. Depending upon the time of year and if there's a policy under consideration that perhaps we are working on, so budget's coming up, let's talk about the timeline, let's talk about some guidance on that. And then I do a little bit of a round robin. Each department head is asked to take a few moments to speak to the issues that are going on in their departments. This does a couple of things. It helps bring folks to know what's going on. That's always good. It helps them understand that they're not alone in whatever frustration perhaps they're having that moment, because this department head might be having something going on in their life, and this one might be having something going on at their department, and they're like, oh, I guess it's not just me, we are alone. Build a sense of team. Also, if there are questions, for instance, you know, I had a department head who had decided to go off and, I don't want to get into the particulars, but handle an electronic transaction in a particular way, and had never spoken with the accountant or the treasurer about it. So I had a chance to say, time out, perhaps you know, you should get together with the accountant and the treasurer, work out a plan that's collectively acceptable to everybody, and then come on back. These don't take horribly long. They're about 50 minutes, and then there's a last call of anything for the good of the order. I did, when I was in the Moulton Borough position, I did, and in Spencer, we did a talk of the town once a month through the good work of the local cable access group. I'd have in a department head, the chairman, state of the town, as we were setting tone for the budget process. I'd have a department head in. If we were working on a community regional busing effort, commuter busing, so I had the head of that person in. We were working on a broadband initiative, so I had that person in. We send newsletters out twice a month, press releases, and my weekly administrator's report, which is really a collection of things from the different departments and what I'm working on, which comes to you all, goes on the website. I go out to put 6 people in a backyard in the summer, or by a fireplace in the winter. We'll take the fire chief, police chief, DPW, you know, whatever the neighborhood has questions on. Short of strapping a sandwich board to my back and walking up and down the streets, I will use any and all means that are available to me. Is it perfect? No. There's always something that you forget, something drops through. But it's any and every avenue that we can find, we try to get out to folks.
That's great, thank you. Who would like to go next?
Well, now, over the years, you've worked with a number of individual members of boards of selectmen in a few states. I know it's probably rare, but have you ever had any conflicts with any of them?
Shortly after going to Spencer, I fired somebody. They ran for the position of selectman 4 years later and got themselves elected. That was not a great experience. Shortly after they got elected, we put the custodial services out to bid, saved about $28,000 over that, and that gentleman ran for the select board and got himself elected. So, there was some grating of nerves there in that process. And in one community, two of the selectmen were engaged in clear ethical conflicts of interest, and they got a little bit upset when I called them on that. I felt that I had to. But for the most part, I get along pretty well with my boards. I mean, they're small towns. Sometimes people run not out of the purest of motives, but they have a personal issue. And so, yeah, I've had some conflicts with a few, but in general, I've gotten along very, very well with my select boards. Some of them I've given to you as references, and I'd be happy to provide you with some more if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm wondering how some of the situations you gave sound pretty big and complicated and turned into probably, clearly if they ran for selectmen and the political conflict arrives there. But day to day, sometimes there's just a disagreement on a budget item or a disagreement on how to, even maybe some of your talk of the town situations that the board might say, why don't you do it this way? Or how do you handle the smaller conflicts?
I really haven't had those for the most part.
Okay.
If I send out an email of, in a town manager role, it's a little bit different than a town administrator. But for instance, there was a workshop coming up next week in the community. I'm currently doing an interim bridge filling for them. I said, well, I'd like to add this to the agenda, and one of them came back and said, I'm not sure 100% comfortable with that. And I'm like, okay, easy enough. You don't have to pick a fight over everything. And I don't. And if a selectman, would you look into this? And it might be a waste of time, in my opinion. Having spent now 30 plus years, I'd rather not necessarily spool out the complete number on. But a lot of times it's like, okay, you want me to look into that? Sure, I'll look at that answer. Easy enough. I really haven't had that kind of minor friction. I really get along pretty well with most of my boards. And whenever there's been a dispute, I think they know it's a professional and it's not a personal issue. I don't take it personally unless somebody makes it personal.
All right.
Sir, what information did you review for this interview, and what is your impression of where Townsend is today?
Well, I want to be perfectly honest with you. I'm in the midst of completing a budget up there, and I'm doing about 60-hour weeks, and Monday night select board meeting went till 12:05 a.m. So I had a chance to look at your former DLR report. I was quite impressed by the state of the town's finances. I got a chance to look at some of your online materials, and I had a chance to go around town a little bit, and I was quite impressed with the quality of your public facilities. How you've been able to get there and do all that, I don't exactly know, but I do have to say, I've worked in some hard scrabble towns, and I've worked in some pretty higher end towns, and I think they'd all be envious of the quality of your public facilities.
We have some beautiful buildings, I agree with that.
Our treasures.
Yeah, we're very blessed.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see here. How many hours a week are you available, and how many do you believe it'll take you to complete the job for us? How many months can you work for us? Personally, I was thinking we should have an interim in place through our budget season and town meeting. So, and we have 3 unions that are up for negotiations as well, and potentially a new union coming in.
Sure.
So I was wondering how long you could commit to us and what your availability is.
I am about to draw a Massachusetts pension, so I'll have the 960-hour cap that will face me. That should work out, quite frankly, about 6 months or so. My arrangement with New Durham has been, and it's worked out actually very nicely, is, well, and first, let me go back to I need to fill your needs. So let me talk to you about what I see, and then, of course, we'd have to talk about, your view of that. My arrangement with New Durham has been that I do an average of 32 hours a week. So, for instance, the last 2 weeks, I was there 5 days in a row, including the night's budget meetings. So we're in budget session season up there. And then this week it'll be 4 days. Next week it'll be 4 because of the Christmas holiday and such. So 4 days plus unlimited email access and phone access, I suspect would work out well to meet your needs. Depends upon what kind of employment arrangement you want and the like. Because with New Durham, I'm on a private contract. And I suspect, depending upon the status of things of where you are, where you're heading into, that 4 days probably would do it. Some days might be 5. Some days might be 6 weeks, might be 60 hours. You got budget sessions. New Durham, I started September 1. They had, at that time, 6 applicants for their town administrator. That was it. I started a new process. I don't know if Andy had a chance to print out a recruitment brochure that I had done for one community. We re-advertised. I started the recruiting. That person should start on January 11. We're down to the 99.
Is that the police chief you're talking about?
Yes, that's an example of a profile and challenge statement that I would suggest you might want to consider going through with the community. What are you looking for? What are they looking for? It's a nice promo piece. It really kind of speaks to what the community thinks of itself. And we use a citizen-based survey to help us with that. So truthfully, I'm thinking 6 months. That would certainly keep me within my cap. We could get you through budget. We could get you through town meeting. I'm assuming you're a mid-May community. I could be wrong on that. Get you through your election. And then, working out whether you want to try to be interviewing and screening before, after. But I think, 6 months or so, we could probably get this done for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see.
Oh, wait a minute. Is it your turn, Cindy?
Yeah, it's my turn.
Oh, sorry. Going the wrong direction.
I know you've been working up in New Hampshire for a few years, right?
I've been up there about 8.5 now in total. Yeah, roughly coming up on 9 now, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you've been following some of the trends going on in Massachusetts with this community, as well as others have signed community compacts with the governor, and we signed a commitment to follow certain best practices for our budgeting as well as our forecasting. And I'm very invested in coming from FinCom prior to coming on here. I want to see us really succeed in that as quickly as possible. And I'm wondering if you've looked at that, if you're aware of that, or if you're familiar with the best practices recommended by the ICMA as well as the Government Finance Officers Association too.
I do have some familiarity with the GFOA, I'm not sure if you're going for a CAFR or not, or you're just trying to transition to a new reporting method. I have been out of Mass for 8 years. However, I've remained up on the ethics training. I forgot to print out my new certificate to bring it to you today. Apologies. That said, I'm known to be a fairly quick study. I was able to go into New Durham and within a month pretty well sort out everything that was going on, get their budget preparation, and leave them with a blueprint which they've adopted for a new organizational structure of several of their departments, reorganizing it so that where planning, zoning, assessing work together, public works working together. So I'm thought to be a fairly quick study, and I'm comfortable that I could get up to speed on any of the changes since I've left the community, the state, I should say.
Can I ask one more finance question?
Of course. I'm sorry.
Is anybody going to address the treasurer?
Yeah, I have that.
Okay, I'll drop that then.
Okay.
All right, next.
Thank you. You sort of touched on my next question is, could you give us an example where you reorganized the town department and how did you carry out this change?
Well, actually, I've been doing it in virtually every community since I started. I came to work pre-Prop 2.5 to give you a sense of how long I've been doing this. For a mayor who had a 25-25 rule, he wanted 25% more service out of 25% fewer dollars. And the first major reorganization that we did was the Office of Community and Economic Development, which put together elements of planning, zoning, Conservation Commission, Redevelopment Authority, Housing Authority, practices in the Historic Commission. They were all separate, independent offices, and we put them together. I don't want to kid you, that was not necessarily the most bloodless thing that we've ever done. Similarly, in Spencer, we there combined the treasurer and collector and created an Office of Finance, which had the accountant in it. The treasurer collector, I left it elected. I didn't try to touch it. That was a third rail I was not going to touch. And the Board of Assessors, which had been elected, we left them elected. But the special statute changed their authority to certify values and grant abatements and appeals. That was it. So the town administrator appointed all the staff in the Office of Finance after consulting with the elected treasurer collector and the elected Board of Assessors. And that one went through very easily. Everyone signed on to it, and it's worked out very, very well. So I think it's one of those things where when you see, everything depends. There's management, grandfather's way, by the inch it's a cinch, by the yard it's darn hard, and you just kind of nibble around the edges. And then there are times, such as in New Durham, where in budget, they wanted that budget cut by at least 5%. We had to find new ways to get things done, and that simply had to be done, contracting out equipment maintenance, doing some other things. So each approach has to be unique to the people that you have, the situation you have, and the timing you have. I was prepared to propose contracting out all equipment maintenance. I'll be honest. It wasn't the easy home run people think it was, because the mechanic resigned. If he had stayed, I would have dealt with, well, what are we going to do with Dave? All that, sort of heartstring stuff that people go through. Each approach has to be a little bit different. I do believe that if you went back and talked with each of those communities, you would find that each reorganization was very successful and delivered on everything we promised, if not more.
Thank you.
I'd like to just... They're not always about saving money either. Some people think that you're going to reorganize and you're going to save money. It's often about simply getting better efficiency and better service within those same dollars. So I don't want to leave you with the impression that these have all yielded some sort of giant money dividend.
That was a good last point, though. That was a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So here in Townsend, the first time in a long while, we haven't been able to certify our free cash. One of the reasons is that our monthly receipts haven't been reconciled as we agreed to in our audits. Actually, I guess our reconciliation goes all the way back to June. She's still working on June receipts. So we're behind on August, September, October, for FY16 as well. Our treasurer collector is resigning effective 12/12. So how would you be able to help us resolve this issue, and how closely would you monitor the issue?
First, I would need to know the particulars that led us to the issue, and is it simply illness, vacancies, is there something else that's going on?
She's a new treasurer collector, approximately 7 months, and about 7 months.
Prior municipal experience?
Yes.
I think some of the issues, they'll go back years. I mean, she's found a lot of stuff that's really been out of sync for a long time. It's not simply things went...
Well, in the reconciliation, the monthly reconciliation, that's where we're at, and that's why we haven't been able to certify free cash, because we're still waiting for the June receipts on the tax side and the cash.
Well, let me just say that one thing I'm thought to be is fairly anal about numbers and fairly good with them. You wouldn't know that by my accounting mark in my MBA classes, but that is supposedly a strength that I have. One of the first things that I would have to do is to sit down, look at your audits, talk with the auditor about where we're at, talk with the treasurer collector where we're at, try to sort that out and figure out a plan to move forward with some very specific benchmarks and, point blank, what do we need? What do we need to do to get there? And then there would be a weekly sit down. How are we doing? Where are we? Did we miss the benchmark? What do we need to do to get back on track? Having the free cash certified at this time in the year, it's not the worst place some communities have been. I mean, certainly I was always on the finance staff of I want to be the first one to set the tax rate in the state. That was always my goal. It's not the worst thing at this point in the year. Certainly you need it certified by February 1, February 28, because you need it for budget planning purposes.
Well, that's kind of the problem, is we have a tentative schedule we haven't had a fall town meeting because there was nothing left in tax levy to spend. So we've been waiting for the free cash to even be able to look at all the requests, hoping that they're one-time expenditures versus reoccurring. We haven't got to that point yet because we haven't known what our situation was financially. So, DOR rules, I don't think there's anything wrong with certifying our free cash for the next fiscal year, if that's what we were trying to use it for. But
if you're trying to use it for the fall town meeting,
which keeps getting pushed back,
I'd have to look at the particulars. It's not the worst situation any community's ever been in. There are communities that are far worse shape. Within 2 years of being in Moulton Borough and within 3 years of being in Spencer, we got clean audits. And Spencer had never had a clean audit.
Yeah, clean audits are a big deal to me. We actually got through a lot of material weaknesses. One of the last ones that we solved was for risk management. We actually entered into a fraud service with our accounting firm.
Oh, okay.
And one of them was the reconciliation of cash, and we were able to get rid of that in the last fiscal year. So it's just kind of concerning that we're now back in that, seem to be in that situation.
And I think I've given you at least one. I can give you 2 more audit firms as references if you'd like.
Thank you.
So I'd have to look at the particulars.
Could you help us recruit a new tax collector treasurer? We are having difficulty attracting people to the position.
Yes. But first, you've got to find one of 2 kinds of people. You either got to get it straightened out and bring somebody in that maybe you can mentor and bring along, or you've got to leave it a mess and find somebody who enjoys that kind of challenge.
Be honest.
Pretty much.
Pretty honest, huh?
We were also considering bringing in a contractor. Is that?
I was going to say, the other thing that you can look at is a contract accountant to help get you straightened out. They're not inexpensive, but there are certainly numerous communities, particularly once you start to get further north in the smaller communities where, frankly, I will tell you that New Durham, I've just reorganized all that. Their books were in such a mess, they ended up bringing in a $60 an hour accountant for the last 8 months to straighten them out. They're there 2-3 days a week. It's not inexpensive, but it's cheaper than having a set of books that are messed up.
Cindy, is it? Or me? I think it's
Can't
Cindy.
remember, I'm lost. That was my question.
I think it's
so
Cindy.
I'm actually, my two key things were conflict management and the finance question, so
Okay.
I'm done.
So you're up.
Great, and if you come up with a follow-up, just take over. That's okay with you. Just 1 second, please. I just want to... could you tell me what your personal strengths are and your weaknesses?
Well, I think that my best strengths are a good sense of humor. You gotta start from there. A sense of strategic planning, a strong skill with numbers and budgeting, and I'm thought to have good oral and written communication skills, particularly with presentations, PowerPoints, the TV presentations, and the like. My weaknesses: we would need to get a shade for my office door because the desk is, my desk is a mess. It's not good.
Put it right up there.
It's not good.
He gets extra points.
He does. Value honesty.
For the task.
I don't always have the best sense of patience with some folks, particularly when they've asked the same question 6 or 7 or more times. I can remember sitting in a room in one community and a gentleman, lovely gentleman, he'd come in, it was like the same questions over and over and over again. And finally the chairman said, Mr. X, we've answered your questions. No, you haven't. And the chairman just said, we have answered the questions. You don't like the answers, but we've answered the question. So that can be a little tough. And I can get a little short with some folks who simply don't want to be part of the team whatsoever. They just have no interest. I'm elected, you can't tell me what to do. This is, I'm on this board, we'll run this department. And, sometimes it's silly things like, in one community we wanted every department to process NSF, non-sufficient funds checks, the same way. You get it back, you do this, then you do this, then you turn it over to the PD, and wouldn't do it. Or they wouldn't turn their cash over once a week. Nope. Too much trouble. So, desk, not the cleanest thing in the world, though I can usually find everything on it, which really surprises the staff sometimes. Citizens who just they keep chewing on the same bone over and over and over. And folks that just don't want to play on the team on basic business practices. We're not trying to tell the town clerk how to register somebody to vote or run their election, but yeah, it'd be nice if you were open the same hours and you processed NSF checks the same way and you came to the staff meeting. Basic business practices. So those are my 3 low points.
Thank you.
So I have another one, if it's okay. What is your level of experience with labor law and collective bargaining?
Well, I've negotiated close to probably 20 labor contracts. with 5 different major unions: AFSCME, Teamsters, Mass Cops, New Hampshire New England Police Benevolent Association, and then a standalone unit. In New Hampshire, when they petitioned for organization, I was able to get the PELRB to knock out 2 of the individuals that they'd petitioned to included, and we went to the Supreme Court and were able to get 3 more individuals knocked out. 1 more and they wouldn't have had a union, because in New Hampshire you have to have at least 10 people. It's 1 short. And in Massachusetts, I've never had to go to the Board of Conciliation arbitration on a grievance. I've never had a grievance that went that far. I think if you talked with some of the unions that I've negotiated with, they would say that he's tough but fair. And you gotta, when you're working with the union, it's about, so why is that important to you? Because you might be able to get there. You might not be able to get there the way they want to, but you might be able to get there. And in Spencer, we went from 10% contribution on health care to 25%. In Moultonborough, we went from having vacation, sick, personal to a single lump sum paid time off. And so I think that each community, when you look at the pluses and minuses, you would find that the labor unions felt treated fairly, and the governing body, the select board, felt like they had been reasonable negotiations, that they hadn't given anything away. You have to look at them as, and not necessarily a zero-sum game, but as win-win. And I'd be happy to give you the contacts of some labor union officials if you'd like.
Sure, it's all right.
Please.
How do you handle interactions with selectmen, the board, employees and boards, and the public?
So with the selectmen, I'll be speaking obviously from time to time with each of you individually, and those will be somewhat one-on-one, and I will try to maintain your confidence to the extent that I can. But when there is information that needs to be known, it needs to be shared equally with all. And one of the things that I work with the department heads on is what I call my bigger than a bread box rule. If something big happens in town, that when you're at the craft fair, or you're getting some groceries, or you're coming out of church, some citizen's going to buttonhole you over and ask you need to know about these things. So I try to keep you informed as well as possible, and that is equal across the board. That's that weekly report. Those are the emails. There's nothing that drives me crazier, and I drive that to the department heads. When a selectman comes to you, number one, you have to remember they're 1/3 of a select board, or 1/5, depending on the town you're in. So if you got a question or it's a small task, do go ahead and do it. Do me a favor and let me know what the heck's going on. You don't have to change your work schedule. But you got to keep me informed, because I want to keep the board informed. So that if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, Joe, what about this?" When you tell them that, let me know so that it can go in the weekly report. A question came up, and I don't need to identify which selectman it was, but a question came up about, here's the answer, because there's nothing worse than me sitting in the room and you turn to me and say, "Hey, I was talking with the DPW guy, and he said," and there's 2, if not 3 of us out of the loop. And if I was in the loop, and you've got in the loop, but we didn't tell them somehow, they're not going to be very happy with me. I'm not going to survive. So with the board itself, I try to communicate. You asked about, I'm sorry, you had 3 there. Citizens?
The next one was employees and boards.
Well, the employees and boards, I'm an interim here. I'm not a permanent, but one of the things that I like to try to do is shortly after being in a community is going around and introduce myself to the different boards, and then if I am a permanent, I try to get there at least once a year. And I encourage the select board to do what has come to be known as a convention of the committees. At least once a year, the selectmen and all the committees get together in a room, circled, no big table, you're the boss, and everybody this way, we're the peons, in a big circle to try to keep, so you can talk about what your vision is, where you're headed. Hopefully you've had some goal setting, some strategic planning that you've engaged in. And we keep that flowing to the boards. I communicate with the boards beyond that through the department heads. The budget's coming out, please make the units that you support, the planner, let's say, or the finance committee, whatever's going on, I work by functional units for the most part. With the citizens, I think we spoke very early on about all those, but let's just take the walk-ins. Citizen comes in, can you see me? The answer is always, yeah. It might be for a minute. It might be for a couple minutes. It might be for 20 minutes. But I've got to try to find a way to wedge in at least a moment or two to chat with the person. Keep my business card that I would ask you to print up for me right there on the counter. Or we'd have to look at the way your office is set up. I'm like, do me a favor. Take the card. Please send me. Do you have access to email? You do? Terrific. Please send me an email. I'm not trying to dodge you, but what this is going to do is I'm not remembering what you told me. I'm getting what you want to tell me the way you want to tell me in black and white. And that, one, eliminates confusion. Two, gives me a perfect opportunity to send and get it to the right person. And it gives me a great tracking tool.
Great answers.
So the last one, and this is not written down, but it kind of, I really like the fact that you like to meet with the boards and committees once or twice a year, something that I've been trying to get moving on, even if it's for training, so that everybody's in the same room talking.
Right.
And, we can hear everybody's needs.
And it's in a non-power setting.
Exactly. It's about getting in a room, what can we do better, those kinds of things. But to go back to that, I'm a very strong believer in monthly department heads and employee meetings every couple of months. And what we've been able to get back into place is reporting to us. We lose touch with a lot of our departments, knowing what they're going through. So we did get quarterly reports from our department heads submitted to us, and I feel that's a great tool. How do you feel about that? Do you like monthly, reports, quarterly reports, just so that the board is aware of the struggles that their department
I like bi-weekly reports from the departments. They don't have to be huge. Here's what we worked on this week. This issue came up. It's what I call casting bread upon the waters. There's a new issue. This issue came up. We have no clue what the answer is just yet, but we need you to be aware of it. We'll keep you posted. Remember we told you about this? Here's where we're at. Now, in terms of formal presentations, I normally ask those teams, whether it's public safety team, administration of finance, development services, and I'd have to look at how you're organized. I'm only here as an interim. I'm not here to turn the world upside down. But I would ask those teams, finance, so I'd have the treasurer, collector, the accountant, and the assessor come in and give a full presentation to the select board within their regular meeting. I don't want them to just submit a written report. I want them to be in front of you. I want you to have that opportunity to have that interchange, and I want that camera to see those people, to understand what they're dealing with and working with, because it helps create a better connection between the government and the folks who take the time to view us at home.
It's a great answer.
Yes, it was. The last two were great.
I don't have anything else, Carter. Do you have anything?
Can I just do one more?
Please, please.
I spent this time, so I want to use them all. And sort of a closer, it's a little bit, tell us about yourself and why you're interested in this position.
Came up in a family of mostly public servants, whether they were social workers or educators, merchant marine. Got my brother, cousin, the Nashville videographer, TV video. We haven't quite figured out how he fits in just yet, but for the most part it's all been public servants. Grew up partially in Vermont. For those, well, some of my friends would tell you I never matured, but and then spent about 35 years overall in the Berkshires. Great community. But then I met my wife, and we've made some decisions based around family needs there. Thought I was going to be a political science teacher, history teacher, political science, but then I realized you have to actually go to college and complete it and do all that stuff, and I just didn't want to be in debt. And so I got my associate's degree and got pulled into public service in Pittsfield, and have, for the most part, not left public service ever since then. I come to formal education late. Got my MBA through an interesting program with University of Heriot-Watt in Edinburgh, Scotland. I did half of it on campus in Edinburgh and in London, and the other half I was able to do distance. I love to kayak. I like to camp. My wife even indulged me and went with me this year. The snake in the privy, that kind of, I think, set her off a little bit from getting her to do that again. I like to bicycle. I've got a strong sense of humor. And I have a deep passion for public service, believing strongly that government, well-run, cost-effective government. I'm not afraid to ask folks to spend tax dollars if I am comfortable. We're really squeezing that nickel to get everything we can out of it, and this is a good investment. And I view those public dollars as investments, not expenditures. My life's an open book. There's one chapter I'd certainly rewrite if I could. Pretty forthright. Ask me a question, I'm going to tell you. If I screw something up, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to call the chairman and say, here's what went wrong. Let me talk about it real fast. Haven't had to do that too often, but I found that the best thing to do if something goes wrong is to just deal with it right away. I'm about fixing problems, not fixing blame. We always have plenty of time to go back and fix the blame. The most immediate issue is, here's what happened, something went wrong. Okay, what are we going to do? Boom, boom, boom. Rear view mirror's real long. We can always go back, pull out the records, figure out what went wrong. I don't know Townsend well. I spent a lot of time on Route 2 between North Adams and Gardner, and I'm one of the people that still misses Monty's Garden. I headed to Boston when I worked for the state and did consulting work. The attraction here is, you're only about an hour from home in Spencer, maybe an hour 10. And if worse comes to worse on a long winter's night, there's an interchange with a hotel or two, and I can get right back to work in the morning. I like to work. I think this is a great opportunity for me. I'd be happy to answer anything else, but that's really me.
That's great.
It was good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you for your time.
Is there anything else that I can...
I think you did a great job.
Okay. I hope we have a chance to chat again. I do have one question for you, if I might. Mm-hmm. How quick are you looking to do this? Because I get a sense you've got a very short departure, and I do have a commitment up north I have to keep to that community. How long is that commitment? Well, originally I was supposed to be out of there when I introduced the new hire on January 4. but those contract negotiations went a tad longer, so I'd be looking at around January 11 before I could be fully out of there. I could get documents, I could start to be talking with people, I could come down a day each week, the week of the 4th to the 11th. I've got to get the new person settled in and started, probably 2 days. So truthfully, until I could be here those 4 days a week, or whatever met your needs, truly that would be January 18th, if I understand the exit window to be what I read it to be. And I need to be honest with you about that.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, folks. It was a pleasure to meet you.
You too.
If I get a chance to work with you, I plan to keep a little checklist of who makes the most motions.
Thank you very much. I knew it. You don't know what you just said. Right.
It was a pleasure to meet you as well.
Should we take a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. So I'd entertain a motion to recess,
Make a motion that we take a 5-minute break, recess.
or do you want to recess till 7?
Why don't we recess till 7?
Second.
All in favor? All right.
Just for that last question. Because a little bit about yourself, Let us know when we're done. Okay, just give me a second here.
Okay, welcome back. It's 7 o'clock, and our second interview is Jim Kreidler.
Correct, yes.
So I thought we'd do, Jim, if it's okay with you, as each of us has questions, so if each one of us could ask. And
Absolutely.
okay. Do you want to start, or do you want me to?
Why don't you start like we did last time?
Okay.
Same order.
All right. What did I start with from the first one?
Is that yours, process stuff?
Yeah.
We help you.
Okay. So one of the issues I feel that our board has is with communication. Better communication with the employees on policy issues and with the residents of the town. What is your communication style, and how can you help us improve with communication and getting information out to people?
Excellent question. It's not easy because everybody's busy. You're all volunteering your time for these positions. You've got citizens that, unlike 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, when there was more time in town, are now working further and further out of town, which means there's less time once they get back in town to dedicate towards volunteerism, so everybody feels the strain of that. So time is limited that you have to even be able to have those connections. So you've got to find ways of bridging what used to be a face-to-face opportunity. Written documentation and electronic communication are the things that I've found most successful. Looking at policies and procedures for Townsend, I think that that's an area that can be improved upon. I'd be very excited to take a crack at working on those policies with you if given the opportunity, even just in an interim capacity. I think there's a lot of work that can be done and a great deal accomplished. You can't expect good communication unless you've laid out expectations on how that communication is going to take place, between whom, when, and around what subject matter. So I think written policies are very important. In terms of the actual communication, my style is basically to employ a communication style that fits the person I'm dealing with. So if Geraldine Smart, if you're an electronic person, you're busy and you like to do email, so at 2 in the morning when you've got an opportunity to come up for air, you can scan email and respond, then I would employ that as a communication strategy with you. Mr. Clark, if you're somebody that wants face-to-face time, your communication is you've got to come in and eyeball to eyeball across a table, then that's what I would do there. And whatever combination thereof would be yours, Ms. King, that would be what I would do there too. I don't think there's one blanket form of communication that you can try to just lay over everybody in every situation. I think you've got to find what works best for people and then bring that as one of the tools to the table. So I think policies, written policies, are very, very important, and finding a way that people communicate best and then meeting them at that place.
I'm a big fan of written policies. In fact, that's been on our goals list for years, and I've got several drafts that I've put out there, so I'm thrilled to hear that.
I've seen some of the meetings. I've watched some of the meetings and seen some of the drafts you put out. I think the red flag policy is imperative.
Yeah, I've been insisted.
We actually, in my last position, we rolled a red flag policy out because there had been one that was very, very loose. It was kind of an understanding. You've got the law. You've got, those that believe in the Ten Commandments, right from wrong. But that doesn't cut it in today's day and age. You really need something that is tightly defined within the four corners of a document, disseminated to everybody that's going to be impacted by it. Everybody acknowledges they've received it, and then they can be held to it. Without that type of a creation of a document, dissemination of a document, you've got nothing. And I was really pleased to see some of the work that you were doing in terms of the policies, because without that, you're lost.
Exactly. It makes everybody understand. But I guess, how would you help us better communicate with employees? There seems to be a breakdown in communication between the board and the employees.
Well, it's interesting because I saw a bit of a disconnect actually between the written charter and the way you have liaisons as members of the board. They seem like a little bit of two different animals, because the charter says, as most charters of this type would, that you expressly are not to be engaged in the day-to-day operations. You set broad-range policy, long-range vision, and then a paid staff person marches. Then when they're the liaisons and I'm hearing meetings where I'm going to go meet with Joe or I'm going to go meet with Jane, it seems like there's a little bit of a bleed over into some of the day-to-day stuff. So I think the first thing I would do is meet with each of you individually if given the chance and say, what do you think the roles are? Because until we understand each other's view on what the roles are, bless you, we're going nowhere. We're going nowhere, and we're going nowhere fast, because I could believe that I read this document to say these are the roles, and you could have an entirely different historical perspective of what the roles have been, and all we're going to do is bang heads. So once we understand what the roles are, then we can define how we communicate. And if it's that there are liaisons, then we make certain that the employees know this is the way we're doing things. So if you've got a select board and you've got an administrator and you've got staff, it all flows like this, but everybody knows where everybody else is at all times. So if there's going to be a liaison meeting on Thursday, the second Thursday of the month, with public works or public safety or general government, everybody knows. So at that time, this is who you're talking to, and this is the agenda that's laid out, and everybody knows in advance what's going on. I think the way you get into trouble is if people are functioning from different expectations as to how people are going to communicate. Because you may have a staff person here, while appointed by you, believing that they are responsive only to Andy, and then they see your face and they say, well, how does this work? Why am I getting questions or direction from her when Andy's my boss? Unless it's clearly laid out, this is how we're all playing, it's just trouble. So one way I would help would make certain that everybody understands how it works. Everybody signs on to how it works. And ultimately, that's your decision. And if you decide as a board that you want to do something that is more hands-on than the charter might on its face say, that's a risk you take. And then if the citizens say, we don't agree with that, then they take it up with their right to the ballot box. My job as an administrator would be for you to tell me how you want to do it, and then make certain everybody beneath me knows that's how we're going to do it.
I think the liaisons historically was just how they were traditionally handled was just so that, like, say, the clerk's in charge of general government and the vice chair is elected boards and then the chair is public safety, is a learning tool, so that when budget season comes, she would be there and she would understand all the budgetary process, not so much as a management tool, just a learning tool more or less for the selectmen too, so that by the time they're chair, they've been involved in all aspects of the government.
I did see something interesting in the Charter Review Committee. The one, I think I actually took a copy of it because it jumped out at me. The one recommendation that jumped out at me was the addition of a phrase, including direction or supervision of department heads and staff, as being something that the board members cannot do. So I don't know if that's indicative of there having been a history of that, or if
I think
that's
it was for
perception.
more clarification. Actually, that's something that's got to be on our top 10. Let's see. I don't know if we'll get there for Tommy. That needs a lot of work there. One of the things, well, that's a whole other subject, but that's something that's going to be on our agenda soon, is the charter. So
it's interesting that you've looked up our charter and made those comparisons and reviewed what we're actually doing.
And again, the reason I do is because unless you know what the rules are, you're just bound to bang heads. I mean, I've been doing this for coming on 25 years, and I've got scars on my back from the times where I've made that mistake. And over time, you learn. And again, I don't care how you choose to do it. You're the boss. You say this is how we're going to do it. As long as it's not illegal, I don't care. But I just need to know so that I can communicate it down the chain.
We need to make sure, so
Yes.
that we're all communicating.
Yeah.
It's wasted energy if we don't know what our roles are.
Absolutely.
And that we're fulfilling our needs, but that you, if you're in charge of day-to-day, you're actually doing day-to-day.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's where I think we need to improve.
And that's all I want to do, quite honestly. I mean, there are a number of things that I could do. With my education and my experience, I could be doing a number of different things. This is what I love to do. It's all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I've ever really done. I mean, I've got a private consulting business that I've had on the side that I've done quite well with. I could do that, but it doesn't inspire me the way this stuff does. It's a bit of a sickness, I think. But
It is a sickness. It must be.
it's what I want to do.
I call it
I
passion.
agree with you.
I call it passion.
Yes, passion.
So I think that's a great segue to the question that I'd like to ask is more for on a day-to-day basis. You've had a number of years of experience and a number of different boards, even the joint board of selectmen working with Devens. And I'm sure on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily the big political ones, but conflicts certainly come up. Sometimes daily, sometimes, especially with some of the questions that you just had. How do you handle those? How do you survive and get through to the next crisis?
I think it's...
No more crisis.
No, I think
I know,
there'll always be crisis, and I think the easiest response I can give you is you've got to have done the work in advance of that crisis. Because unless you've established an understanding of who each other and each other's roles are, who you are and who the roles are, and have an appreciation and a respect for those roles and people, you're dead on arrival once the conflict hits. Because you've got nothing to lay back on, nothing to base it on. There will be a time, I mean, I love my wife dearly. More than breathing, right? It doesn't mean we don't fight, doesn't mean we don't have crisis, but we have that foundation behind us of knowing that, yeah, this is ugly right now, something we've got to get through, but we know who we are and what we're about, and that this is just something we need to work through. Unless we had that as a basis to fall back on, we'd be one of those statistics that are on the ugly side of divorce. We're not, because we have that foundation. Same thing with a board of selectmen and an administrator. You can get divorced pretty easy and pretty quick if you don't have a respect for each other and an understanding of each other's. I mean, there might be times, if I'm in this gig, there might be times where you have an issue, and I know in 37 seconds it's going to blow over, and I just have to shut my mouth, bite my tongue, and then we'll be able to talk about it. If I don't know that about you because we haven't learned that about each other, I might jump right in when you're hot, and then we're off the rails. So it's about learning, I think, about each other and how we think and how we play, and being mindful of the bigger picture, that it's not just about that flashpoint, it's about the bigger roles we all have.
You're up, Mr. Clark.
I am. I'm trying to be fair about this. What information did you review for this interview, and what is your impression of where Townsend is today?
I reviewed everything I could find. I'm not foreign to the area. I mean, having grown up in Fitchburg, I know a lot about Townsend. Townsend was my country house. I mean, it seems silly, but I camped here as a kid. Whenever I needed to escape on my bike as a kid, I was at Trap Falls. So, I mean, this was getting away to the country. Now, I know this is your town, your metropolis, but as a Fitchburg kid, this was like my country escape. So I love the community. I love when I read the master plan and it talks about wanting to hang on to the rural nature of the community. I can appreciate that, because that's what I first grew to love about Townsend, was just the rural nature of it and everything that it had to offer in terms of open space and trails. I've read annual reports. I've read the audited financials over the past several years. I've watched videos of your meetings on YouTube. I've read minutes off the website. I've been in town stopping for a cup of coffee and talking to anybody that will listen to me. What do I think about the town and where you are? I think you're in decent shape. I think all things considered, being as geographically isolated as Townsend is, which is not any different than Ashburnham where I live or Winchendon where I most recently worked, it's difficult because when the economy starts to pick up, it happens in Boston and it slowly bleeds its way west, and then just as it's about to get to the north central region, the economy tanks again and it never quite gets to us. So we get like the last little lap of the wave before it starts going back out again, and we find ourselves still holding our heads high and being able to balance the books at the end of the day. So I don't know Andy very well. What I can see in terms of the budget planning and the documentation, it looks like things that he brought from Chelmsford when he worked with Bernie Lynch, which was award-winning stuff. So that stuff is really sound to build on. Healthy reserves and stabilization is good. I'm concerned about hearing the thought about using free cash to supplement library and council on aging. Not to suggest to anybody that's listening that those aren't important services in the community, but one-time revenues on recurrent expense is a recipe for disaster. So I think there have got to be other ways of prioritizing, and ultimately the taxpayers make that decision. Your job would be to give me the marching orders. These are the general vision we want for the town, and these are the priorities. I would then prepare that budget along those lines, and ultimately town meeting is going to say, no, we don't agree with you, and definitely not you. We want this. And at the end of the day, they make that call. The fine dance there is making certain that the warrant is built and the budget is built broadly enough that they feel like they have a true say in the ultimate decision. Because I've seen communities build a warrant and build a budget so tightly that it's a foregone conclusion. You're either going to blow up the town and have no budget and have to come back to town meeting, or swallow and take what's handed to you. So I think it's important to be respectful of the fact that the taxpayers have the ultimate say, but actually give them a say. 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you would have participation by the public in the front end of the process. They'd be at the budget meetings, they'd be at the selectmen's meetings, they'd be at the FinCom meetings. You don't get as much of that generally anymore. So a lot of times people's first exposure is when they come to town meeting. And it's dangerous because you don't want them to get the impression that they come to town meeting and they have no say, because it's either you like it or you leave it. So it's an interesting thing lately to try to figure out a way to leave it tight enough that it's a real budget, but open enough that people have some say in how things are ultimately going to get voted.
I feel badly because I didn't talk to Carter about this, but since we're on this subject, we were fortunate enough to apply for the compact through the Governor Baker, and we're going to get some pretty, I think it was about $20,000, isn't it? We've been operating without budget projections for about 5 years, and we're fortunate enough that they're going to fund us with grant money in order to do that. So what are your thought processes on the budget projection and the money for also budget documentation that they're going to be helping us with? Are you familiar with that program? I
am. I've actually I've been following in the city of Gardner. Mayor Mark Hawk was one of the first to sign on with a compact, and they're getting the same assistance. I think it's imperative. You wouldn't try to run your household budget week to week without knowing what your paycheck is going to be 2 weeks out. You wouldn't commit to buying a new car if you weren't certain about what your income was going to be. So I think, if we recognize the value of doing that in our personal finances, why is it that we feel okay to back away from it in government? And I think some of the reason we have found comfort in doing that as a profession, I'm not talking about you, but people like me, is because since 1980, municipal finance has been really, really tightened up. Under Prop 2.5 in Massachusetts, you pretty much know what your revenues are going to be in terms of real estate tax, and that's the lion's share of what you're going to see locally. You can have a pretty safe sense of what you're going to see for local receipts. on a year-to-year basis. The one wild card is state aid, and you can follow that cyclically based on politics. You can see who's running, when they're running, what party's coming in versus what one has been in. And you can almost trend how the local aid is going to go. So I think we've been lulled in a sense of complacency to not do that long-range forecasting on revenue side, because it is unlike pre-80 when you could just raise real estate taxes, by a vote. You can't do it anymore. So that revenue stream is pretty tightly defined going forward. I think where that causes a lot of trouble is we've not seen the same stability on the expense side, whether it's health insurance, which is an issue that I think there's an opportunity here on health insurance to look at a joint purchase agreement with a number of other municipalities or government entities to try to spread the risk. $1 million for a community the size of Townsend is a lot of money to be putting out for health insurance, if I'm reading the budget number correctly. That's a big nut to try to roll into this budget. But when you have things like health insurance that spike and they're to a certain degree beyond your control, you don't have the same luxury of the revenue side saying it's going to be this number out over time because we're so hamstrung. So I think that's a lot of words for a short answer, which is I think it's imperative that you do that type of planning, and those types of documents will be helpful.
Who's up next?
I would say Cindy is.
You asked the same question I asked Carl.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was the same question.
Oh, the compact program?
Parts of it were. How about conflict resolution? That was
No, I already did that one, but the question that I had my second question was about the compact.
Sorry.
But, so apparently you're familiar with it,
Yes.
with the compact. And I want to, the state's given us the tools that we need in order to provide, to do budget projections and to do a budget according to the GFA guidelines, as well as the projections through the ICMA guidelines, which we're starting to work towards. And
Excellent.
you're familiar with
Yes.
that, obviously. And
Yes.
prepared to.
Yes.
I really want, as you know, probably I'm coming from the
Finance.
FinCom.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
really something I really want to.
Yeah, military background and finance background scares me. Scares me. So just so you know.
Okay. So you know where we're going to be.
That type of.
But I do want to be very focused on actually being successful at getting as much as that done by the guideline to meet the compact by.
Absolutely.
As much as I can.
Sorry.
No, by town meeting, I'd like to have part of it started. It's an educational piece because it takes buy-in from the department heads.
Absolutely.
In order to change some of the presentations and to educate the community and have them involved in just what you said, getting that budget out there and having them understand it and be a player.
The problem, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the problem is that you've got to find a way to make it resonate with people in their living rooms.
Right.
And unless you can, it's just going to create more difficulty when you roll out something entirely new and foreign at a town meeting.
Right.
When right now, that's generally the first time people are seeing the document. At least now they're used to, historically, it's looked like this.
Oh, right.
So, I mean, it's going to take, I would respectfully, I would say that sitting in December and contemplating a spring rollout of a new...
Oh, no.
Yeah, okay.
Just get
Okay.
the piece, just so that...
It'd be bedlam.
I know it would be, I know. Chaos.
Yeah.
But you'd be a good participant to be able to...
Oh, absolutely.
You know exactly what
Absolutely.
my picture.
Absolutely. And the thing that's really cool about this, though, is the state wants this stuff to happen quickly for purely political, if not truly altruistic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
They want this really neat program that they've rolled out to be able to happen and to get good press and to show that there's this state, local, kumbaya thing going on. So we're going to get the benefit of that money and their attention because, not just because it's the right thing, but because it looks good for them too, which is great.
Yeah, and I'm not as interested in the state political piece of it. I'm interested in, I like the best practices. I agree with. I've gone to the workshops. I've studied it, and I think it would be very helpful for us to be able to get out of this using free cash and understanding exactly how to project and get future-oriented and to be able to
Absolutely.
not have a crisis every time. How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to move things around?
Absolutely.
And if we have an understanding, if more people have an understanding of how to to put that cushion into the budget, then what it looks like, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely.
So you want to give me the treasurer
Yes, you
question?
can take the treasurer, since I took your question. I didn't mean to.
All right. I'll ask it a little differently. But as you might be aware, our treasurer is resigning as of the end of this week.
Yes.
And we're in the process of trying to even make decisions about getting an interim treasurer, or even possibly to contract an organization to come in and help us through a transition in order to, until we can get a full-time treasurer. And we're behind on a lot of things. Our free cash is not certified.
Right.
And receipts aren't, we haven't closed out the fiscal year yet from last.
No, we're about 7 months behind, and she hasn't finished June's receipts yet, so our accountant hasn't been able to close out our year. That's why we haven't got our free cash certified. We're not even aware of what that number is at this point.
Is the cash book balanced, at least?
They have not been reconciling monthly, so I know our accountant's a little stressed out about it, so we were actually thinking of bringing a contractor in.
Absolutely. Don't hesitate.
Yeah, and then...
I mean, there's almost an emergency procurement there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and would you be able to help us recruit for...
Absolutely. Absolutely. On the assessor side, obviously an entirely different side of the house, but I brought in an outside firm in my last position to handle all of our assessing functions. We were paying a staff person a full-time salary. We were contracting out all of the actual assessing work, and then we were paying legal to handle all abatement requests and appellate tax board hearings. It was really a ridiculous sum of money that we were spending to do what, based on what I was able to research, we could get done with an outside outfit. We ended up bringing somebody in, and they've been, I think, coming on their 4th year now, and it's about probably 2/3 of the cost all in, and we're getting everything done. So I'm a big proponent of maximizing service for the dollar that you've got, and sometimes you make enemies. I made a lot of enemies. At the end of the day, I've got to be able to go to bed knowing that there are this many dollars on the table to get the work done, and I've arranged the dollars in a fashion that gets the work done to the best that can get done with those dollars. And if that means privatizing something when there's an incumbent sitting there that may have 3 generations of family in town, I take that hit, and I'm fine with that. I don't know how the politics of that play, and that would be something that I would need to learn locally. But at the end of the day, people say government should be run more like a business, and it's cliche, and it's kind of hard because we're not at all a business, because we don't have a deliverable. There's no profit incentive, but there are things we can do that are more business-like, like getting the biggest value for the buck, and the politics can get in the way of that. My experience has been to not let it. Sometimes, again, I have the scars to show when I've made those decisions, but I think it's imperative that you do something on the treasurer's side sooner than later. I mean, you're coming up on the new year, and you don't have the books closed out. That's trouble.
Yeah. Sorry, we've hogged the show here.
I'm actually learning. I rely on these two for financial stuff all the time. They both have talent. Let me see if I can get a little more here. Could you please give us an example where you reorganized a town department, and how did you carry out this change?
There have been several that I've done. The assessors is one that we just touched on briefly, and another good example, I know that there's an elected water commission, which is different than in the prior positions that I've held, but we had water department as a division under public works. We had one public works director that had highway, water, sewer, parks, cemeteries. We had an employee group doing the water and looking at the expense, purely business decision, the expense that was reflected in the salaries and the associated benefits for that division, and looking at what it could be contracted for off the street, put an RFP out on the street, with a scope of service that covered, at a minimum, the work that was being done, and then had several add-ons that weren't being done that should. And we were able to get several add-ons above and beyond what we had been getting for service for less money than we were paying for the lesser deliverable with staff in-house. 4 years later, the market had changed, reevaluated, and we brought it back in-house. The reason I bring that to your attention is I'm not a person that is going to make a decision and then stick with it, even if it, after a certain period of time, is no longer the best decision. I'll change my mind if it's the right thing the next day, and I'll step up, belly up, and say, I need to change my mind, and these are the facts that lead me to that conclusion. So just because I've made a decision to change something doesn't mean if it's in the best interest of the town to go back, that I'm not going to hold tight to the original decision. I'll go back. So, Mr. Clark, that would be an example of one structural change that I made and why I made it, and then structural change I made back and brought it back to where it was, and that's where it still sits today.
Thank you. Who's up now?
Okay, what do I have here?
One, maybe?
Well, I'll be touching on that too. I know we talked a little on communication, but one of my questions was what is your management style, and how often do you communicate with your board members? What is your position on department head and employee meetings? How important are they, and how often do you have them?
There's a lot there. I have had members of the select boards that I've talked to multiple times a day because that was their thing. They felt the need to communicate and touch ground several times a day. And that's fine. I've had other members, you've probably each seen something. Did you each get an email? I sent some references late this afternoon. Okay. Keith Barrows I was blessed to have him as a chair for, I think, 9 or 10 of my 15 years in my most recent job. I could go a month without talking to Keith, other than seeing him show up for a meeting. But he would read. We had a README file, so anything that came in of import, there was a spreadsheet that showed, the to, from, the subject matter, and then if they wanted copies of it, they just, click it, and we'd send them a copy so they could read it. So they didn't get paper dump every week, but they got a spreadsheet, and then they could pick and choose what they wanted. He would read everything, and he'd be able to remember everything, and very rarely would he miss a beat. So someone like him, I'd rarely have to speak with, because he functioned better out there just doing the work and reading it himself. So my communication would be whatever you would want. If, again, Mr. Clark, if you're a face-to-face guy and you want to be, eyeballing, amen, that's what we would do. If you want email, if you want a combination thereof, whatever you would want as the communication style between us is what I would do. That's what I'm paid for. About departments, department head meetings are very important, but they're important that you don't let them devolve into gripe sessions, because that's what they want to do. I think there's a default condition that they want to just devolve into complaints, because nobody is happy with their budget. When you get right down to it, nobody is happy with their staffing. Nobody's happy with the fact that Joe got an extra, dollar in budget, discretionary that Jane didn't. So department head meetings, I think, need to be structured very tightly with an agenda, and they need to be action related. And the way you avoid a lot of the grumbling is to make certain that you're communicating with your department heads on a regular basis. Again, in the same manner, if my fire chief, who you should have seen a letter from, is a face-to-face guy, which he was, we would do that. We'd have lunch. He liked it. I liked it. We'd have a solid 40 minutes to look at each other and talk. I would have a police chief that was too busy, and we would communicate electronically. So as long as I have a beat on what's going on with them on an ongoing basis, by the time we've built the agenda for a department head meeting, I'm not being surprised. I know what the issues are. I know whose gripe is the one that's the biggest and the freshest that I can address without it having to be brought forward as a gripe, but instead can be addressed as a resolution. So I think that's very important. I think it's important for department heads and staff beneath department heads to know who you are and where you are and why you are, to the extent that it's appropriate. Because in some of my experience with some boards I've worked for, there's a disconnect between kind of the great and powerful Oz behind the curtain, the Board of Selectmen, And then there's, I'm the guy, peeking out the door, who is it? Why are you here? Go away. And, the employees are out there not knowing what end is up. And I think that's dangerous because, well, I'll run interference with the best of them if that's what I'm asked to do. That's not healthy. I think to the extent that there can be a quarterly or, maybe it's only an annual kind of a state of the town meeting where it's very informal and people, whether it's over, a bundt cake and a cup of coffee or a pizza and a Coke, select board members, department heads, employees, on the line level can be in the room and have a sense for who each other are, and what their thinking is. You would think in a small town, people know. You'd be surprised, what their impression is of what you ran for versus why you really ran. Why, if there's a recall pending, why are you going to heck with this? You don't want me? I'm out. You'd be amazed what people think your rationale is for doing what you do. And unless you actually get in a room and have the opportunity to have that discussion, you just end up, again, you cross wires and you waste so much time and energy. And I heard you guys in the meeting, I don't know who the guy was, but he had a particular issue about something, and you said, just call me. All you have to do is call me, And he said, well, I like it to be public. On the phone call, you never, well, call me first, and then we'll play act it out. On TV next week, whatever we got to do. But my God, we live in a small town together. We're going to church together. Our kids are playing, t-ball together. Whatever it is, we should be able to work this stuff out without coming to swords. And I just think it's unfortunate when it gets to that. It's a curious parallel. When I interviewed for my last job, there was a recall pending. The clerical administrative staff was considering unionizing. The budget was not yet finalized in December, and the books weren't closed.
It's familiar.
It's frightening. Now, what I found is that was really just an unfortunate conglomeration of junk that was happening right then, because that community was very sound, and it didn't take long to get it back on track, take a bond rating that was hanging over a junk rating and get it up to a AA+, to take stabilization that was nothing and get it up to $2 million. I mean, the bones were there, the pieces were all there, but it was just everybody was just poking at each other and kicking under the table, and I'm seeing some of that, I think, if I'm reading the tea leaves right here, right now, and there's just so much better way to spend your time and energy, particularly if you're volunteering to be out and away from your families on a night like tonight when you could be, watching Survivor or whatever's on, I don't know.
Or being at your wife's birthday.
My wife's birthday.
I think you'd rather be here than watching Survivor, actually.
It's my birthday on Monday.
We're all Sagittarius, so sounds good.
No.
I'm Leo.
No, it's worse.
Ooh,
It's even worse than FinCom and military.
there you go. I wasn't going to say that. Makes sense, though.
Am I up, ladies?
You are.
Okay. Let me just make sure which ones I haven't asked. Give me a second. I'll go a little order. What are your personal strengths and weaknesses?
This is one of those questions that you're going to get asked, so you always try to think of a cute answer. And this isn't meant to be a cute answer, even though my wife said I shouldn't use it. My strength is my integrity. I'll compromise with the best of them, and I always try to find that middle ground to just move a step forward, but not if it's going to go outside of the four corners of what's right. That's a strength, and it's something that I'm very proud of. It's something that I think you would see echoing through some of the reference letters you've seen. In this business, I've also found it's a weakness, because not everybody plays by the same rule. And there have been times where it would have been easy for me to compromise on my ethics or my integrity in order to get by better than I was going to get by sticking to my guns. And I've always chosen, again, back to the scars on my back, I've always chosen to stick to my guns. The fact that it might be easier tomorrow to come to work knowing that I'm not going to have people with their daggers drawn because I compromised on my integrity. But someday I'm going to face somebody that I've got to talk to a little bit differently about the decisions I've made in my life, and that's more important to me. So integrity is my strength, but integrity has also been a weakness of mine in terms of being able to not get tied up in some of the politics sometimes. I think I wrote in my cover letter, I know that my position that I choose is not a political position, but it's exposed to politics. I'm not naive about that. So as much as I can try to suggest to you that I'm not political, that would be nonsense. I'm very political because I have to be able to smell the angles and who's coming from where and what it means, bigger picture. And to the extent that I can get ahead of an issue, and co-opt is a wrong word. It's got a negative connotation, but channel or direct a conversation or a path, I'll do that. I'll try to do that to try to avoid what might be an impending conflict. I'd much rather work together in compromising our paths to avoid that landmine than walk blindly into it. And there are times that's going to happen. You know it's there. You're not going to compromise your values, your morals, your ethics. So you make a choice. You either walk away or you step on the mine and do your best to hold on tight and get through to the other side.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, please.
You said that you spend time in politics. I think we've had a lot of that in the town lately. To me, your selectmen should have to deal with the politics, and the town administrator should be able to just do the work.
Absolutely.
With integrity. When you say you play politics, could you clarify that a little bit more for me?
If I said play politics, let me retract that, because that's not what I intended to say. What I mean to say is I've got to be aware of politics. I've got to be able to smell it. I've got to be able to know. And this comes, I think, to knowing who you are and why you're here, because that colors your politics, your personal beliefs, and your agenda and your action. I liked your answer in the, when the question's asked in a candidate's night, do you have an agenda? It's meant to be this negative thing. You're supposed to say, no, I don't have an agenda. You said, yes, I do. I do have an agenda. And we all do. So my agenda would be to make certain that, from point A to point B, that the municipality is managed and managed well and in a fiscally appropriate way. And I've got to be aware of what your politics are and your politics are, because there may be an issue that I'm coming up on that I know you differ on, and I'm responsible to you. So I've got to say, okay, how am I going to get from point A to point B when I know that there's going to be an issue between people to whom I'm responsible? Because you don't want the pipeline and nobody wants the pipeline.
You're good here.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, there could be an issue where it's notoriously known that you differ, and I've got to be able to navigate that. That's what I mean. I've got to be able to navigate the politics of everybody's particular agendas and positions, which is different than playing politics. Playing politics is me knowing that you have a particular issue and me working her to try to get at you.
Yeah, that's.
So
I think we've got a lot of that.
It's easy to fall into that. I've seen some of my best colleagues do that intentionally. Some do it well and go a long way before they get caught and tripped up in it. It's no way that I'd want to go, because eventually that's going to bite you in the backside, because people aren't dumb. You're not dumb. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You wouldn't be in the positions you're in. You can see through that. So I want to be clear before we leave that. It's not playing politics, but it's being aware of people's individual politics and knowing how to navigate it.
Well, thank you for that.
I think that sort of goes to what I believe in negotiations, that a lot of times negotiations, people aren't all happy, but when they're done, they thought they were treated fairly. And then we got to a place that's good for all.
Yeah.
That's
I'd encourage you to
attempt at trying to say what you just said, is that we have to all give a little bit, maybe in the future, that we can all do that, but come out to a place that's good for all, but that we thought we treated fairly. So I'm getting off the track,
yeah.
but I think that you surmised it very well for me. Who's up next?
I don't know, Gordon.
I know you have two that are important. I'm only trying to keep track to help you out.
Yeah.
This one here, if I could, and then this one here.
You want to read my questions? Yeah. You can take one of mine.
Well, I don't want to. I just want to make sure we cover them.
Oh, yeah.
So
What is your level of experience with labor law and collective bargaining? We have 3 contracts coming up, negotiations, renewable July 1, and we have a new before organization that's coming through, new petition.
Without commenting on the petition, because labor law would make it very problematic if I did, or if you did. I mean, once cards have been pulled, we really need to just shut our mouths and let what's going to happen happen. And the worst thing that could happen would be me as your administrator going and talking, department head or staff person and saying, are you going to join? Are you not? Are you going to sign? Are you going to not? You'll be sued in a heartbeat and you'll lose. And you should just, put your head, on the block and not waste the legal funds because you've broken the law. So without touching, whether or not there's going to be a group unionizing the existing groups, it's one of my favorite things about the job. If you look at the fire chief's letter that was sent along earlier today, when I started my last position, he was a relatively new chief, full-time chief. He had been a long-time call guy at the combination department. And the fire union was a very contentious group. They had historically just beat their chests and got whatever they wanted. And that's not uncommon. And with very little money, very little to no money, and a lot of work at just developing goodwill and trust, and doing it in what's that old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It was a big task to build trust with them, and you had to do it a bite at a time, a piece at a time, and it was baby steps, but building enough trust with them over the course of the first couple of years. We went naked for a couple of years on a contract with the fire department because it wasn't the same old where they were going to beat their chests and the town was going to roll over and give. So we ended up hanging over the very edge of the Joint Labor Management Commission, which is the police and fire body that would supervise impact when you reached impasse with police and fire. But over the course of time, building that rapport and that sense of trust with them, I've said this, and that's what I did. I said, if we do this, this will happen, and it did. I've not played sleight of hand with budget numbers. You want to come in and look at the books, I'll spend as much time as you want going over every receipt to show you that this isn't just the typical, we don't have any money, so I can't give you money this year. That type of investment in a relationship pays dividends. And I think, as the chief said, that relationship within a couple of years was a beautiful relationship, and it exists to this day. So much so that we went one contract with 3 zeros. Now that's a PFFM IAFF group.
Yeah.
AFL-CIO. These are big dogs. These are people that with the drop of I say dime, quarter. I don't even know, there's no payphones anymore. With the pickup of a cell phone, have their national rep at the table, and it's scary stuff. I mean, that's they're a tough union. These guys would come to the table and they'd say, we'd like a 333, cost of living. And the chief and I would be able to say, these are the books, these are the numbers, we can't do it, we can't do anything. And, we talk language. Well, I'd love to do that piece of language, but if I cost that out, that's not just going from a may to a shall, that's $6,800. We can't do that because that's money too. So it's about relationships. Again, it's where I started with communication with you. Unless we've built a relationship where we have an understanding, we don't have to like each other necessarily, but we understand each other and why we're doing what we're doing, and have that foundation to fall back on. It all goes pretty badly pretty quickly if you don't. So labor relations, it's about relationships. Focus on the relations portion of labor relations. It's about relationships.
Can I offer you water? We're working pretty hard here.
No, I'm good.
I'm using the water boy. I'll bring water.
Thanks.
Who's up now?
Did you have anything else?
I think the only other questions were, when can you start?
I'm actually Right now, all I'm doing is the things that my wife asks me to do every morning. I'm not currently working. I'm working my consulting business. I'm doing some of that stuff, just keeping some projects going along to not lose my mind. But so I'm available to start, with short to no notice. Obviously, I'd want to make certain that I let my wife and kids know that them having seen me around in sweatpants painting the house all summer and just putting a hardwood floor in the kitchen this past week, that eventually that's going to stop and I'm going to be gone for a while again. So.
Well, that was one of my last questions. Can you commit to us with an interim position? Could you commit to us for at least 6 months, because I want to make sure we get through budget season, town meeting?
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest you use anybody unless they can, because you'd be better staying naked than having somebody jump into the stream and bail.
Yeah. We need stability.
Yeah. No, I think at a minimum you need that.
I don't think I had. Did I cover everything else? We did this free cash, management style. Yeah, all my questions have been asked.
Do we want to ask hours of work?
Oh, yeah, that was part of it. Would you be available for at least 40 hours?
I would expect it would need to be at least that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, you'd be a flexible schedule. Some weeks you might put in 60, and then you could take 30, but...
Sure. Again, you know what's needed. So if anyone sits here and says they can do it in 20, wrong.
Could you help us kind of do it, if you were to come in, could you help us kind of do an assessment as to where we're at? A lot of times when folks come in, they kind of like to take their time to get to know anything, but would you be able to help us assess our financial condition with that?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think one of the things that's really cool about an interim gig is that while it may become something long-term, that, if people decide that they want to consider that, that's not what it is. It is a finite period of time where you get to come in and you get to know that this is basically a free shot. You get to come in as a troubleshooter and say, this is what needs to happen to get from A to B in this period of time. And along the way, if you notice that there's a crack, you make a note. There's a crack that needs to be fixed. So it's, I think that type of assessment should be one of the things you demand of whoever's going to come into the interim gig.
That's... Anything else?
If you two, I just have my last one to, that's okay? Is that okay with you, Sandy?
Sure.
Okay. Just to wrap it up here, could you tell us about yourself and why you're interested in this position in Townsend?
Sure. Central Mass, North Central Mass, all my life except when I went to school. I was raised a blue-collar household, not just a blue-collar, but a dirty blue-collar. My dad was a construction dirt guy, which has benefited me immensely. Having been a kid in high school, working with my dad, and down in the trench with the sewer line break in mud and sewerage up to my thighs, and knowing that this is work that needs to be done, but it's not work I want to do. He did a really good job of teaching me that if I want to do something other than what he's doing, I need to work hard at school. I was blessed to go through a really good school system in the Fitchburg public school system. I was not very bright in that I didn't really apply myself terribly well. I played sports against Middlesex, football and track, and I was a good enough kid that I just kind of cruised by. I was set to go in the Marine Corps out of high school because I really didn't think I wanted to do anything else. My football coach pulled me aside and got me into Worcester Academy, prep school in Worcester. I did a postgraduate year at Worcester Academy, which was really cool for me. It was scholarship. I got to play football again and run track again and not go in the Marine Corps. From there, I got my board scores up and my grades up and got recruited to play football down at Columbia. Not because I was a good football player, but because they were just that bad. Longest losing streak in the NCAA Division I, and I'm a part of it. 44 games straight. But I took advantage of it to get an Ivy League education. So I studied abroad for my junior year in London. Got to travel all over the world as a kid with no responsibilities, no obligations to anything. So had a really good opportunity there. came back, settled in Central Mass, started working in public administration. I worked for a mayor for 5.5 years, worked in the town of Air as town administrator for 5.5 years, in Winchendon for 14.5, just about 15 years. And I've dabbled in private sector stuff with my private consultant company, and I realized that I could do really well if I focused on that, and I chose to do that. But this is really, again, I call it a sickness, and I mean that in a charming kind of way, not in a derogatory way. It is. It's just, it's in my blood. This is what I want to do. I've been out of it now since May, when I left my position in Winchendon. I'm itching to get back in. I find myself still reading the journals, still reading the legislation, that's pending, impacting municipalities. It's something that, God willing, I'll do until I retire. So that's
2 o'clock reading the city and town updates.
exactly.
Modernization of municipal finance.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
So
feel that sickness.
That's about what I'm about. I've got 5 kids, a grandson. Thanks, I know. I'm pops. And love my home, work hard at it. My 2 youngest are still living home. They're 10 and 13, so I got a ways to go yet before I can put my feet up. I don't know what else to tell you about myself, Mr. Clark. This is just stuff that I've always done. I've always wanted to do. It's I went and got my master's to do this better. And again, God willing, it's what I'll do until I retire.
It sounds like you have a theory that, humbly, I think I used to have, that it's a privilege.
Oh, it is. It is. And, I heard a selectman in the town of Templeton maybe say one night at a meeting, he said, I may be a civil servant, but if you continue to treat me like your servant, I may not be very civil about it. And I thought, it's pretty sad when, that's funny, right? But it's pretty sad when it gets to that. And unfortunately, people don't generally call or email to say something nice, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person, but you do take the time when you want to make a complaint. So when we have less and less time to do the things that we used to have more time to do, now it seems like that's even distilled even more. So it's just the negative stuff that kind of spikes up and comes over the surface, and you have to deal with. And it's a privilege to do this, Mr. Clark. I agree with you. I wish, if I had a magic wand, I wish that people that, for very legitimate reasons, don't have the time to do it, would respect the fact that you're choosing to do it a little more than they often do. So.
Thank you.
I think, did nobody else have any?
Any questions for us?
No, I've spent the last couple of weeks poking around. So
I thought so.
Yeah. Congratulations on the fire station this weekend too.
There's a lot of good things going on in town.
No, I know. I took some.
A lot of good
What time is
things.
that? 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Switching to a salt program, studying DPW. We got some good stuff going on.
Yeah. How are you guys? Random thought, but do you guys have Narcan in the cruisers?
Do we?
I believe we do.
I'm not quite sure what our status is on things, but that's certainly
Yes.
something that would be...
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Don't do they? Thank you.
I think there's a lot of it around.
I know it's in our schools and everything.
And I think once we bring our new chief on, that with the board, the town administrator, and the new chief, that we want to somehow have a collaboration to the quality of life issues, the opiates. We can't look away, and we've had, unfortunately, family members touched by it who are trying to help our community. So that's interesting you touch on that, because that's a quality of life.
No, absolutely.
So it's actually nice that you asked that.
Oh, it's interesting. I forget if it's now Beverly or Gloucester or which community it was that took the lead in saying that it's to decriminalize,
Lost it. Lost it.
this issue. It's a substance abuse, it's a mental health, it's a chemical sickness, it's not a crime. And it's easy to just say, that's too much work. let's just continue to crime and process people, and
And just so you know, it's a passion of mine. You may not know this, I was a nurse taking care of people dying from...
I didn't know that,
And
yeah.
so they know that. But I was also have task force where we get $2 million from the deals. But there's a difference between those who are sickness and those who feed the sickness.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so as a small community, we need to take care of those who have the sickness and those who want to provide the sickness. We have to let them know Townsend's not the place to come. That's getting off the track here, but I'm glad you're interested.
Very much, very much. On the police chief issue, now, I know you've got Badge Quest. I know that Andy was on, but pulled himself off, if I understood correctly. Where is that process? And
Well, we have the fire chief and Chief Ryder are currently on it. My thought, we haven't really discussed it yet, was that whoever we pick for an interim would
jump in quick.
because we need that.
Yeah.
I've dealt with Badge Quest before. Very, very good outfit. The assessment center that they put on is something that I will admit, because I know no one's listening, I'll admit that I've ripped it off and used it myself. I've actually taken some of the format because it's just really good.
You're on television live right now.
I know Mr. Pomeroy missed the answer, so that's okay.
But that brings out a point is that you're familiar with the assessment centers. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
if you were the person, you could jump right in to assist us, because that's important that we do quality work, but we keep it moving.
Yep.
So what I understand is that we're at the closures, and now we're going to the next couple of weeks get down to 15. Then they start with that.
Excellent.
But what we're trying to do as a board, and tell me if I'm wrong, we're trying to stay out of it to the final 3 come.
Sure.
And so that it's
I think
clean.
that's smart.
And because everyone I checked with, I've said this before, is that Mr. Pomeroy's white glove. And that,
No, he is.
And
He wouldn't let you get involved.
exactly. And I like
Even if you wanted.
that's one of the things in the interview is that he wouldn't compromise on his integrity.
Yeah.
But he's willing to give us what we need. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we posted for the town administrator position to be on that screening committee, so it would just be a matter of you stepping in.
Excellent.
If we chose you to step into that role.
But now interim chief DeMora is January 16. He's contracted until. Is he going beyond that if this hasn't yet been finalized? Because that's you're dealing with 4.5 weeks out. So
Yeah, I think that's probably one of those things we have to continue with all the different. We've got so many different things on the fire between the treasurer, the police chief. We've got weekly changes.
I was just
Coordinate.
being mindful of the timing of that. That his paper says I think January 16th he's up, and you won't have selected somebody using the Badge Quest till probably March. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Jim.
Madam Chairman, if I could just intercede here, look for guidance from you too. I see that we probably should take a break, and will we? Are you too prone to enter into discussion about this?
Yes.
And then are we prone to do that in open or executive session?
Executive.
Okay, and then I'm only asking, so correct me if I'm wrong. If we made a decision, we would continue negotiations, if the people here or not, and then, all right, so stop me.
We're going in to discuss strategy with
Okay.
respects to contract
So
negotiations.
we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back?
Yeah, we are posted for tomorrow.
Okay. Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah. Sure.
And I'm not your guy, so I apologize. Be cautious going into executive session to make a decision about a person.
We're not doing that.
Okay.
We're not
Just-
doing that.
I'm watching the press executive session.
No,
That's why I
just to
seek
discuss
guidance from
contract
them. Yeah.
negotiations, we haven't even talked about
Okay.
what we want to offer the person.
Excellent, okay.
So this is strategy so that we can appear confident when we do offer it
Yeah,
to somebody.
it's just so easy to get dinged on the open meeting law
And
unintentionally.
we
so.
appreciate the guidance, so we don't have to do that. So
Excellent.
well appreciated.
All right. All set?
Yes, we will be making a decision in open.
Okay. Excellent. I'll look to hear something from you either way.
Okay,
All
great.
right. Thank you. Pleasure meeting you. Thank you. Pleasure meeting you.
You too.
My God, you're tall. When you sit down on TV, you don't look it.
Are we coming back here for anything on TV tonight, or are we all done?
No, we are going to have a discussion, Harley.
Okay,
so,
so-
yep.
I'll just say-
We're going to take a recess for 5 minutes, if that's okay with
It's
the
fine,
board.
whatever the board wants.
Okay.
Quick one. Quick
Okay,
five.
thank
So,
you.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we go into recess at 7:59 for 5 minutes.
Okay, great.
Second.
All in favor?
Back into open. Yes.
We're not going to go into executive, then back into open, so you don't need to worry about meeting
We're just taking a quick break then we're going to discuss what we just did.
Fair enough.
And then what we're going to do.
But we are coming back on TV.
We are going back on TV in 5
Okay.
minutes. So don't rush out the door.
Just taking a break. Okay, welcome back. It's 8:05, and we just finished our interviews with Carter Tenzanini, I don't want to mispronounce his name, and James Kreidler. And now I'd like to open up to my colleagues to discuss who you think we want to offer the position to. Pros, cons?
Well, I was impressed in a number of ways by both of the candidates. I think they both gave a good presentation to us. And after reviewing the resumes and the references that they had sent and the interview, I like the second.
Jim?
Mr. Yep.
I sort of kept a score, so in my mind I could look back here. And the first candidate, he was very competent, but he was averaging around the middle of the spectrum until the last couple about how I liked how he felt it was necessary to have meetings and keep. I thought he's been strong. But the second candidate, Mr. Kryler here, he got nothing less than a 9 or 10 for every single one. And another thing is that I saw something that moved me. It was passion. Passion. You can't, when I used to train dogs, you can't create drive or passion. It's either, it's either there, you can enhance it, or you can diminish it, but you can't create passion. And I think he has passion about his job. And I thought that, and I think Cindy knows that his preparation was extreme. Extreme. I mean, and...
He did his homework.
Yes, and he understood it. And I was learning from him, which of the three here, I'm probably the one that needs to learn the most. But I was learning by listening to him. And I go, this is a person that we could have a team with here. All of us working to keep on doing great things here. So plain and simple is, I'm absolutely for the second one. I just wish we could hire him full-time now, but that's another story.
And I think he didn't hold back. He didn't...
True.
Integrity. He talked about topics that he did his homework. He knew that were hot spots.
Absolutely.
And
maybe he can help us work through it.
He was willing to go there and talk and say that he was aware, and he was willing to work with them.
Very good.
So my board doesn't mind. I'd like to hear from Jody, our executive assistant, because I'd like her feedback. She's going to be working closely with either Carter or Jim.
Yeah, I feel like I got the same vibe working-wise, but from both of them.
Okay. Did you think either one had any particular strengths that you liked, or?
No, not particularly. It's tough to say until you're in the trenches together, so I don't really.
Okay.
They both seem very nice, but I don't really have an opinion one way or another. Both of them seem like I said, nice gentlemen.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're comfortable with both of them. Well, I am a little different than both of you, I guess. I really liked Carter. However, he's not going to be available till the middle of January, so that kind of...
Self-eliminates him?
Yeah. I liked his accounting and financial background, although he did say he had a really good sense of humor. I was waiting to see it. So I agree with you. I think Jim is the candidate that we should offer the interim position to.
Do we need a motion, Madam Chairman, on that?
Make a motion that we
Offer the position.
offer the interim town administrator position to Jim Kreidler.
Second.
Pending contract negotiation.
Pending contract negotiations.
Sorry, second.
All those in favor?
Unanimous.
So I think the process, we're going to be entering into an executive session, folks, so we can strategize about negotiations with Mr. Kreidler. And I would like to ask our executive assistant if she would like to contact Mr. Kreidler tomorrow and let him know? Or do one of us want to do it?
I would say either Jody or the chairman. I would think it'd be appropriate.
Okay. So
How about-
I'll touch base with you in the
So-
morning, Jody, and we'll figure out. Would that work? Okay.
And we'll send a letter or contact Carter as well.
Exactly. Well,
Okay.
yeah, we should send a letter thanking him for his time. He did an
So-
excellent presentation.
Madam Chairman, I'm just asking, we'll be back here probably tomorrow night, because we're already scheduled for that?
We are posted for tomorrow night. If he can meet with us tomorrow night, we'll be entering into
Is that at
contract
6 o'clock?
negotiations. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session and to adjourn directly from executive session.
That requires a roll call vote?
Yes, it does, Gordon.
It took me 6 months.
I make a motion that we enter into executive session pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to discuss strategy or to conduct negotiations with non-union personnel in respect to the town administrator, which may be taken, and that we will adjourn directly from the executive session.
Gordon Clark, yes.
You got a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Gordon Clark, yes.
Cindy King, yes?
Carolyn Smart, yes. Good night, folks.
Thank you, Townsend.